Hello, and welcome back to How to Write Properly, a short daily course on style and expression with me, Dr. Adam James Smith. And today's episode is going to be a very quick presentation about adjectives. And this follows on from yesterday's class, very brief tutorial about verbs. So if you haven't seen the session on verbs, you might want to go and have a quick look at that. It's just 5 minutes long, and then come back when you're ready for this, which is all about adjectives. So yesterday when we were doing verbs, I said it might take your mind back to primary school. You might remember verbs were described in Key Stage 2 and 3 as doing words. Well, you might remember adjectives being described when you're in primary school as describing words. So I thought we'd start today with the definition for children. I found this as part of a Key Stage 2 resource, and it says an adjective is a word that describes, and it can describe an animal, a person, a thing, or a thought. Adjectives include words that describe what something looks like and what it feels like to touch, taste, or smell. Adjectives can be colours or words that describe temperatures and sizes. So coming clearly through there is the idea that the adjective is the word that's doing the describing, and it can describe any of these things. Now, later in the week, we'll describe these things as subjects, the subject of a sentence, but today it might just be useful to begin thinking of them as animals, persons, things, or thoughts. So there's some examples here. If I said, I have a red ball, the ball is the subject, and the fact that the ball is red, that's the adjective. It's telling us something about the ball. The dog was wet. So the word wet is the adjective there, telling us something about the dog. And it was a delicious bit of cake. We love a bit of cake, and that bit of cake was delicious. The fact that it's delicious is conveyed to us through an adjective. So that's the kids' definition. Let's move up to the adult definition, the dictionary definition. An adjective describes or modifies nouns and pronouns in a sentence. Now, don't worry too much about nouns and pronouns. We'll get into that in a lot more detail in tomorrow's tutorial. But for today, all you need to know is that a noun is a name. Nouns and nouns are the names of things. Pronouns are the names you give yourself generally, or the names that are attached to people. But yeah, nouns are names. So an adjective describes a thing that's got a name or can be named, and it can also modify a thing that has a name or can be named. Adjectives are normally used to indicate quality, size, shape, duration, feelings, contents, and more about a noun or pronoun. So again, you've got the idea that they're used to describe things, but also in the adult definition, a bit more of a sense that the adjective is there to provide a little bit more context and a little bit more information about the subject of your sentence. So here are some more complicated examples. She realized she was happy. So we learn that she's happy. Her happiness is conveyed to us through an adjective. It's giving us more information about the subject, which is the she of this sentence. This slide in the presentation was very obvious. So again, it's telling us a little bit more about the slide, that it's in fact obvious. When it eventually happened, the moment was very sudden. So the moment is the subject, and the suddenness of the moment, again, is conveyed to us through an adjective. Now, there's all different kinds of adjectives, so I'm just going to go through a few common examples here. So this is probably one of the most common examples, and this is what that children's example was based on, a descriptive adjective. So this is where an adjective is used to describe a noun or pronoun, a person or thing, basically. So common examples like the red ball, I have a fast motorcycle, he was hungry, they were annoying. So all of these adjectives are telling us more about those subjects. And you can also get quantitative adjectives. Sounds scary and complicated, but it's not. So these are adjectives that provide information about the quantity of the thing that's being named. So for example, I have gained 2 pounds since self-isolating. The pounds that I'm putting on in weight are the subject. The fact that I've acquired 2 is conveyed to us through the adjective. He had 1 dog and 1 child. So this sentence has got 2 subjects, and we'll get onto that in future weeks. But both of those subjects, we're told about the quantity of them through an adjective. So 1 dog and 1 child. You can also, less obvious example, make sure you watch the whole video. So the video is the subject, and my invitation to partake in the entirety of it is conveyed through an adjective. Now you can also get proper adjectives, and this comes back to the idea of nouns again, which, as I say, we'll explore more tomorrow in tomorrow's lesson. But an adjective, the adjective form of proper nouns. So this is where the adjective forms proper noun. So, a proper noun is used in the adjective. So what's a proper noun, you might think? Well, nouns are names for things, names for all things. If the noun being used is to describe a place, a person, or an organization, or something specific, it's a proper noun. So, for example, America is a proper noun. So, if the adjective is connecting the subject to one of those proper nouns, it becomes a proper adjective. That sounds a little bit complicated and convoluted, but the examples will make this clear. So, I don't much care in the example for American grammar. So it's not just grammar that I don't care for; it's American grammar. So again, the adjective is describing the type of grammar, but also the description happens to be a proper noun, so it's a proper adjective. So when you have an example, it seems very simple. Have you ever eaten a Subway sandwich? So again, Subway is describing the sandwich, but Subway is also a brand name. So it's a proper noun, makes it a proper adjective. Post-structuralist critics make the least sense, generally. I'm not just talking about all critics, I'm talking specifically about post-structuralist critics. The word post-structuralism, which is a proper noun, because post-structuralism is a specific name for a specific thing, is working as the adjective and describing the critics. Just a couple more. So you can get 3 different degrees of adjective: positive, comparative, and superlative. So positive, you all know what positive is. That's saying something nice, something that's not negative. So if I was to describe a canine entity as a good doggo, I would be using a positive adjective. If I was to compare that canine entity with another one to determine that the original was the superior, I might say he is better than your doggo. So that's comparative. I'm comparing the 2 dogs. It's a comparative adjective. And superlative is a sort of compliment. So if I was heaping praise on that dog and I said he is the best doggo, I'd be using a superlative adjective. There's other types of adjectives that I won't go into in much detail, but you can get demonstrative adjectives. So that's words like that, they, this, these. So if I said these keys, I'm not just describing any keys, I'm describing some specific keys. That specificity is brought to us by the word these. So that's an adjective. Possessive adjectives: hers, his, ours, my. It was the biscuits were ours. So the word ours is telling us they're not just any biscuits, they're specifically biscuits that belong to us. I think that just shows how a lot of these examples do show quite how integral pronouns are to the way the English language works. And you can also get compound adjectives, which modify the thing being named. So it's not just a car, for example, it's a broken down car. Totally changes our understanding of that vehicle. Interrogative, interrogations are all to do with questions. So which card did you use? Whose blood is this? The blood and the card are being affected by the question, the interrogative adjective before them. So it's describing our understanding of them in some way or informing it through context. Articles is perhaps something I'll get into in a future video, but these are words like a, the, an. These can affect our understanding of the subject. So it's not just all cats that are stalking me, it's a specific cat that's stalking me. And then also you can get indefinite articles, which is where the information, the context being provided is a little bit more general than specific. So for example, if I said this tutorial would take a few minutes, that would be indefinite, rather than if I said this tutorial will take 5.5 minutes, which is specific. So all different kinds of adjectives. But in conclusion, what do we take from this? So thinking about adjectives in sentences, because remember in day 5, we're going to be thinking about basic sentences and how to structure them. So an adjective is the part of the sentence that describes the thing that's being named, the subject in the sentence. But unlike verbs and subjectives, you don't have to have an adjective in a sentence to have a sentence. You can have sentences that don't have adjectives. But adjectives are useful because they add detail, specificity, and originality. Pretty much any word in the English language can be used as an adjective, which is different to verbs or nouns. You can use anything to describe something else, pretty much. As I say, they provide context for the verbs and subjects in your sentence. Most of the information about the subject is going to be conveyed through adjectives. And adjectives, as I say, usually provide relevant information about the thing that's being named. Information like what kind of thing, how many of the things, which specific thing are we talking about, and how many of that thing are there, how much of that thing do we have. So adjectives are really useful, but they're not actually grammatically essential to have a sentence, unlike verbs and subjects. So that concludes adjectives. Join me again tomorrow, where we'll talk more about nouns, which we've talked a little bit about today. And that session will also help you to identify when you should and shouldn't use capital letters inside of a sentence. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks very much for joining me. See you again tomorrow.